Hello and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where we dive deep into regional headlines and speak with leading policymakers and business leaders. I am Katie Jensen. On this episode, we speak with Samuel Žbogar, the representative of Slovenia to the UN Security Council. Slovenia has become the latest European nation to recognise Palestinian statehood, but how will this be put into practice? Plus, despite the UN Security Council backing President Biden's ceasefire plan, neither Hamas nor Israel will sign on the dotted line. Can this deadlock be broken, and who is to blame? And as tensions rise, what measures are the Security Council taking to prevent the conflict from engulfing Lebanon? Ambassador, thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking. Now, earlier this month, Slovenia's parliament passed a government-sponsored decree for the recognition of a Palestinian state, following similar recognition recently by Ireland, Spain and Belgium. Now, tell me, how does Slovenia plan to implement this on a very practical level? And frankly speaking, do you think that it matters to Israel?
Well, Slovenia did recognize Palestine, which means that immediately the next day we signed agreement on diplomatic relations. We are hoping Palestine to open embassy in Slovenia, and we already have a person on the ground in Ramallah who is representing Slovenia with Palestinian authorities. So officially we implemented the decision of the parliament. Look, the recognition, we've been discussing in Slovenia for years about this recognition. Always there was a political process that we waited. Now, since things happening in Gaza, I think we thought it's time for us to send a message. This is a message for Palestinians. It's not a message to Israel. It's not a message to Hamas. Neither of them really care for their citizens. They're using Palestinians and hostages as an instrument of pressure on each other. And this is, for us, it's a message to Palestinians that no matter how difficult it looks at the moment and that the world is abandoning them, that we do recognize the right to have the state, to live in their own state. And it's time to do that. I think that's how we did it. And why we did it at this specific moment. Look, we have been friends and we continue to be friends with Israel. And we think this is a message to them as well that what they're doing is not right. I think that they're on the wrong course. And it's not, Israel is much more than the current government. And I believe that people in Israel will recognize that what we did was a good thing to help bring peace to the region.
Well, that's a bold statement, still friends with Israel, given the fact that more than 37,000 Palestinians have now lost their lives. But of course, the recognition of the Palestinian as a state is important. Around 140 other nations now also recognise Palestine as a state. Importantly, none of the G7 countries have made that move yet. But I want to talk a little bit about your work at the UN Security Council. You are a special representative for them. And recently, we've seen the Security Council adopt Resolution 2735. That took place on June 10. And of course, that was the ceasefire plan first presented by President Biden. Now, as we know, Hamas has refused to accept it without certain amendments. Israel has refused those amendments so far. Tell me, which side is to blame? And do you see it being resolved? If so, how?
Well, first, I wouldn't give up on the Biden plan yet. We understand the talks are still ongoing, mediated by Qatar, by Egypt, and the US, of course, as well. I think the US put its authority behind this plan, so we hope that we will see it implemented. So we want to give a peace a chance, let's say. So we haven't been discussing in the Council this week a situation in Gaza precisely to give negotiators time to finally come to a ceasefire. We do hope that's going to be. Next week we are going to discuss again Gaza, and this will come up because we cannot wait that long to see implementation of the resolution. This is the fourth resolution of the Council that is calling on both sides to a ceasefire. But as I said before, we have the impression that both of sides are just using civilians and the hostages for the pressure on the other side.
Okay, but where do you see the main blockages coming from? Is it from the Hamas side? Is it from Israel as well? We've seen very strong statements from Netanyahu, who said Israel won't agree to a ceasefire without the destruction of Hamas's military and governing capabilities. Where is the real blockade? You say it's too soon to abandon President Biden's plan here that he says is Israeli-backed. But where is the biggest obstacle today?
Well, we are not negotiating with them directly, so we wouldn't know. And we just know what people are telling us, what countries are telling us. I think I would be prudent to say that I believe the problems are on both sides. I wouldn't say that it's one side that is rejecting the deal. I would think that both sides somehow are not comfortable, which means that the deal is a good one. And we really hope that it is implemented to stop this killing and suffering of civilians in Gaza.
And of course, one of the big concerns is that as it stands today, the UN is unable to distribute the aid that is so desperately needed in Gaza. We've seen big problems, particularly at the Israeli-controlled Kerem Shalom crossing, because of what's been described as lawlessness and panic in the area. Now, this is despite Israel around 1 week ago announcing they would pause military fighting during the day in order to allow aid to get through. Tell me, what are the security conditions that are needed to be put in place to allow this aid to be able to access the people who need it most?
I think it's one word, a ceasefire. Nothing less than a ceasefire would allow enough distribution of humanitarian aid in Gaza. It's very difficult to distribute at this moment where the rockets are flying, where Israel is rejecting more than half of the trucks because of the dual use, where, as you said, there is public disorder now in Gaza after so many months and the desperate situation that the people are in.
So you say the rockets are still firing despite Israel saying they will pause daytime military fighting to allow this aid through at the border. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes, because we have seen so many times when the humanitarian workers had approved road on which they could deliver the aid, and yet they were targeted. Like we were seeing with World Kitchens a few weeks ago or months ago, how they have all approvals. They were in touch with Kogat on Israeli side, and yet they were targeted one after the other. So how can you expect humanitarian workers to go into this situation, even if they have promises from Israel, today we will not target? How you expect people really to sacrifice their lives when they see that 200 of their colleagues distributing aid were killed? And that's why the ceasefire is the only solution, the only way how we can distribute more aid inside Gaza.
And of course, Israel has been the one to come out and say that it's because the UN has not taken full advantage of this new route. But as you mentioned, Gaza has become the most deadly place in the world for aid workers today. And of course, there's big concerns that the crisis is engulfing not only Gaza, but now threatens Lebanon as well. We've seen several strong statements come out from Israel as well. Israeli military commanders saying they will accelerate the readiness of forces on the Lebanon front. We've seen in a total war, Hezbollah will be destroyed. Lebanon will be hit hard, according to the Israeli foreign minister. He's threatened that. Tell me, what action is the Security Council contemplating in order to prevent a full-blown war?
Well, if you allow me first on the first part, when you were talking about, just to reply to Israel accusations about UN not being capable of delivering aid. I mean, first and foremost is the occupying power who is responsible for situation of the population that it occupies. So in first place, it should be Israel who should be taking care of people in Gaza. Second, UN is ready, but the trucks were destroyed. They cannot bring new trucks in. They don't have equipment to protect and communicate. There are no roads in Gaza. They have been attacked by military all the time. So how would you expect UN really to sufficiently distribute aid? Now, second, on the Lebanon thing, you know, we entered Security Council in January. Our first statement was on the first days of January on Houthis attacks in the Red Sea. And there we were warning, or we were calling against spread, or warning more about spread of the crisis into the region. And we saw the link between Houthis attacks and Gaza situation. And we were also saying then constantly that calming Gaza would calm also other conflicts in the region. Now, what is happening with Lebanon, or Israel and Lebanon, is very worrying. And the Council, I'm sure, in the next few days will discuss about it. We are monitoring, we are seized of the matter, but we haven't taken any decisions or not even, we didn't even have any proper discussion yet of how to engage. Some member states are involved, like France and the US. I think they're engaged directly with the parties, but I think it's really getting very, very worrisome, not only for Lebanon, but for the whole region. So I'm pretty sure that in the next days, the Council will address this issue as well.
And tell me, what is Slovenia's position on these conflicts that are spreading just beyond Gaza? You mentioned some of the Houthi attacks in the Red Sea as well, certainly an ongoing issue, as well as these escalating tensions along the Israeli-Lebanese border as well. What is Slovenia's position on the conflicts that seem to be spreading quickly across the region?
Well, our position has been from the beginning that the conflict in Gaza has to stop, and that would help all the other conflicts. Not that the other conflicts have their own problems or reasons, but Gaza is fueling other conflicts, inflaming other conflicts. So we need to stop, we need to have ceasefire in Gaza, and that would allow then to calm the other conflicts as well. This is our position. And yes, we are very, very worried that it's really going to explode in the region. And on top, you know, you have the whole population in the region that might be turning against the international community, that we are not doing enough to stop the bloodshed in Gaza. I think we might be using the whole young population across the region. That's the messages we are getting from all the countries, all the special representatives there. That it's for the future relations between the West and these countries that is very dangerous situation. So again, back to, I think solution to everything is ceasefire in Gaza, and then one by one to deal with the other problems and put them in place.
And I think that's an important point, because more regional escalation and a war between two well-armed enemies, Hezbollah versus Israel, risks devastation for millions of people, risks dragging in Iran and the US. So, Ambassador, I have to wonder, can the Security Council not bring more pressure on the Israeli government to be able to choose negotiation over these wars that seem to drag on forever in so many different arenas in its own national interest?
Well, first, we adopted several resolutions, as I said before. Resolutions of the Security Council are binding on the members of the UN. When we enter the UN as the country, you sign to the Charter, you sign that you respect the resolutions, decisions of the Security Council. But of course, none of this resolution was adopted unanimously. And I think this is also a problem. I think Security Council is the most effective, or maybe the only time that it's effective really, is when it is completely united. When we will have 15 votes in favor, I think then maybe will be strong enough message to Israel and to Hamas that enough is enough. and they have to stop. But so far, the last resolution, Russia abstained. The previous resolutions, US abstained. And this is always a message to one or to the other side that maybe there is still room to maneuver.
But
look, Security Council adopted resolutions. Of course, there are other measures that the Security Council can discuss about. According to the Charter, the Security Council could engage beyond the resolutions, but we are not there yet. I think now, as I said at the beginning, we are waiting to see this Biden plan to come into effect, given that the US, it's the US plan, US stood behind it, and we expect that it will be also implemented.
And of course, President Biden presented that plan as Israeli-backed, but Israel has not officially endorsed it. But let's talk about some of the actions at the Security Council. You there have seen the vetoing of numerous ceasefire resolutions for Gaza since the war erupted last year. I have to wonder, do the warring parties take UN debates seriously, or rather, do they view them as rather distant geopolitical jostling?
Well, I think they follow them, as we understand also from some people who talk to the parties, not only in Gaza, but also in other conflicts. It seems that the parties listen very carefully to what the Security Council does, and also to the statements of the Security Council members. And that's why, coming back to my point, that when we come to the point where all Security Council members will be united, speak the same, maybe that will be the strong enough message to the parties, not only in Gaza, but also in Sudan, for instance, where we also have very, very catastrophic situation at the moment.
And we have seen some independent support for Palestine and the creation of a Palestinian state, something that we mentioned Slovenia has done recently. And I want to talk about this in a bit more detail. When it comes to the recognition of Palestine, isn't there a risk that the Slovenian opposition, who boycotted the parliamentary vote, could annul the decree if they ever return to power one day, and even rescind the recognition of Palestine?
No, I don't think this can be done. The parliament adopted with the majority that was required. This is now the law in Slovenia, and in international relations you cannot unrecognize, even though some countries try to do that. It's not possible. Once you recognize a country, you cannot unrecognize it. So yes, there was debate in Slovenia. Opposition was thinking that we are going too early, that it should be, the recognition should be result of the peace process. On our side, on the government side, we believe that after the destruction of Gaza, we saw even more clearly that we need two equal parties. We need two parties that will be equally sovereign, and Palestine and Israel, in order for them to be able to negotiate their future relations. Otherwise, as long as you have one party that is weaker, then it's not proper discussion, and that's why that prevailed then in our reflection as well. We need a Palestine that is on the same level as Israel.
And of course, the parliamentary vote was actually sped up in process, wasn't it, in reaction to Israel's deadly assault on Rafah, which, as we know, has displaced more than 1 million Palestinians and added to hundreds more deaths. So I have to wonder, could the EU not have done more to try and prevent this deadly assault? Well,
this Rafah is really something that will be haunting us, I think, as the members of the Council and as the human society in the future. All Council members in the chamber, as well in consultations, were saying Rafah should not happen, was warning Israel to go against Rafah, and yet we witnessed that it happened. So this is really something that I think it's difficult to live with, to see, to the never-ending suffering of people, of Palestinians, of Gazans. So Yeah, I lost your question. Sorry. EU. Couldn't EU do more? Yes, it could, it should, but unfortunately we are not united. EU is strong when it's united. Then really we can be a strong player in international relations. On this topic, unfortunately, we have different views inside the EU. There is a lot of countries inside who is supportive of Palestinian cause and who is recognizing Palestine, but still we are not united. Also, as the crisis continued and deepened, I think there was more and more understanding on the European side that maybe supporting Israel and its right to self-defense which we did at the beginning, was not appropriate anymore. So you don't hear that anymore from European leaders. And also Borrell High Representative took very clear position all along the crisis. But yes, we are not united, and that's why we are not the real player in this crisis.
Do you see it as a failure of the EU or of the US as well? You know, even President Biden, who originally said, there'd be no red line when it came to Israel. Even he stepped forward at one stage and urged Israel not to invade Rafah. They said they would not be providing more military weapons and ammunition. Of course, we now know that not to be true. Do you see the US also equally responsible in the EU failure?
Well, I don't want to judge the U.S. positions or the U.S. actions. It's up to them to judge how they perceive the situation and the statements they were doing. I think we as the EU, but more we as the Council, I think we could have done more had we been united, maybe in our projection of our rejection of attack on Rafah to Israelis. And actually there was Algerian resolution on the table. It's just that at that time a Biden proposal came out, and then we were supporting and adopting resolution in support of this proposal, hoping that ceasefire will happen the next day. And we're still waiting.
And Slovenia has been a powerful voice at the UN Security Council in favour of a Palestinian request for full UN membership. You touched on this a little bit earlier, but tell me in a bit more detail, why is this the right time for such a move? Why wasn't it in the period before October 7 last year? Or why is it not the right time in the future? Why is it now that this is so important?
Why is this now the time for Palestine to become member of the UN?
Yes, for full membership.
Full membership, because they fulfill conditions according to us. We are now member of the Security Council. The request by Palestine was put before us. We judged it. They are a peace-loving nation. They confirmed this in the letter. President confirmed this in the General Assembly last September. They fulfill conditions that are set for members, so why not? So that's why we voted in favor for their membership.
And your foreign minister has framed the recognition of Palestine as a moral duty. Of course, we've seen a very different move from Israel. Their parliament is now advancing a bill that prevents countries from opening consulates or embassies to serve Palestinians who are in the occupied East Jerusalem. Tell me, how does Slovenia intend to thwart this plan before it takes effect?
We have office in Ramallah. We don't have office in East Jerusalem, but we have office in Ramallah, which covers Palestine. And so far it functions well. So far they don't have problems, also after recognition. They function normally. They inform us about situation. And our embassy in Israel also continues to function as before. Yes, there was some reaction from the Israeli side on our recognition. But our recognition has, actually nothing to do with Israel. We recognize Palestine on the Palestine territory. So it's not that we took Israel something away from. we recognized Israel earlier in their borders of 67, before 67. So that's our position. This is about Palestine. We did it for Palestine.
Well, let's talk about the Palestinian people themselves, because the most recent poll of Gaza and the West Bank by the Palestinian Center for Policy and Survey Research shows huge dissatisfaction with the Palestinian Authority. In fact, more than 60% support its dissolution, and close to 90% want President Mahmoud Abbas to resign. Who should govern a future Palestinian state?
Well, I don't think it's surprising, this dissatisfaction, because the Palestinian authorities are not, they don't have power to deliver to their people. And that's why people are disappointed. They continue to see Israeli occupation. They continue to see, they see what's happening in Gaza. And of course, they are disappointed that their authority is not protecting them and cannot do anything about it. But they really cannot do anything about it, if we are seriously. So who should run Palestine or Gaza? I think it's up for Palestinians to decide. I don't think it should be foreigners to decide. They should decide who should govern. Of course, there probably will be some transition period in Gaza after all this is over. There will need to be transition period with regard to the security, to re-establishment of security, to provide security to Israel. There will be a need to rebuild Gaza. There will be a lot of needs. And I don't think Palestinian authorities can do that on their own. I think probably UN should be involved, should be helping them, coordinating all the assistance and all the support that will coming from abroad in re-establishing Gaza as a place to live.
And of course, in terms of, being able to get Gaza, to get the people of Gaza what they need most at the moment, that badly needed aid. We know that Slovenia has allocated around 2.5 million euros to try and alleviate the consequences of the conflict. But as we've talked about today, getting even modest aid into Gaza has proven to be a huge challenge due to Israeli restrictions and fighting. We've spoken to UNICEF's James Elder. He said that children are dying of malnutrition just 15 minutes away from where hundreds of aid trucks lay idle at the border. Tell me, is this something that concerns Slovenia?
Our aid goes through all to humanitarian organizations, to World Food Program, to UNRWA, to World Health Organization. Some of the aid we transported it with the help of Jordan. Our Prime Minister was just in Jordan last week, and he also met the King of Jordan. They discussed about the future help of Slovenia that will go through with the help of Jordan. So we do believe our help goes in the right hands. But of course, the concern that the aid is not coming in, that of course it's huge. We discussed this in the Council for the past several months, that it's not enough aid coming in. That's obvious. We established mechanism with Sigrid Kaag, which is supposed to help distributing. But we are coming to the basic discussions that we had, that you cannot distribute the aid if there's no ceasefire.
And of course, without that ceasefire looming, we continue to see restrictions on aid. We've seen the loss of more than 37,000 of people who've been killed. We've seen a humanitarian calamity on every level, huge suffering, injuries, and huge large-scale destruction on hospitals, on schools, on humanitarian sites as well. Tell me, does Slovenia categorize as what's taking place in Gaza as a genocide?
We will wait for the court, ICJ court, to decide about this claim. It's a huge accusation. Yes, horrible things are happening in Gaza, and we are sure court is looking at that. But the court is the only institution that is authorized to label a country doing a genocidal act.
Okay, so the death
we are
of
refraining from
37,000 Palestinians. We've seen statements from Francesca Albanese, who is the UN Special Rapporteur for the Palestinian occupied territories. She said the fact that more than 70% of the recorded deaths have been women and children, and that Israel has failed to prove that the remaining 30% adult males were active Hamas fighters. She says the fact that Israeli forces have wounded more than 80,000 Palestinians, detained thousands of Palestinians, men and boys as well, that they've also destroyed or severely damaged most of Gaza's life-sustaining infrastructure. Slovenia's position is that is not enough to categorise it as a genocide, that they are not able to rule it as a genocide, despite seeing these videos coming out on a daily basis that have been verified. Your position is you need to wait for the men at the court to classify it as a genocide.
Well, you put it around a little bit. We are horrified with what is going on in Gaza. That's no doubt about it. We are shocked. I think it's not only that Israel is failing, I think humanity is failing in Gaza. We are all failing Gazans, watching what's happening with so many dead, as you mentioned, the schools with the children, maimed children. It's horrible, and we are shocked that this is possible in the 21st century. We are shocked that Israel is doing this crime. But for genocide, the court needs to establish intent that this is doing, that the country is killing, maiming, and so on, that there is intent in doing it. And that's why we are refraining from declaring or saying, even though we see that there are signs there, but we will wait for the court to declare it.
Okay, there are signs. Now, finally, let me change direction somewhat. Let me ask you about the crisis in Ukraine, because media reports recently have said that Slovenia secretly provided Ukraine with a number of lethal military equipment when US aid was stalled for around 6 months. Looking back, hasn't Western arming of Ukraine really dragged out the conflict and unnecessarily cost both Ukrainian and Russian lives?
Well, first, we didn't give aid to Ukraine secretly. Our military aid follows the right of Ukraine to self-defense. Ukraine is asking for help to defend itself against Russia, which is occupying part of Ukraine. Ukraine is defending itself, asking for help. We are providing help, as some other countries as well. So we are not... there's nothing secret about it. We are proudly telling that we are supporting Ukraine defend itself. Now, you know, is this dragging the war? This is just helping Ukraine to defend itself. The war is happening on Ukrainian territory. It's Russia which is occupying a quarter of Ukraine territory. So we don't see how not to help Ukraine. According to UN Charter and Article 51, they have the right to self-defense, and we are helping them do the self-defense.
Well, Ambassador, that's all we have at time for today. Thank you for joining us today on Frankly Speaking and sharing your insights with us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure.